Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Belosic. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Belosic, your host. I am very glad today to be joined by Jim Belosic. He is founder at a company called SendCutSend, and he's here to tell us all about it. Welcome, Jim.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome. I don't get an opportunity like this all the time, so thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you're here. Talking to your folks, your story caught my eye. I thought it was very interesting mix of regular manufacturing and then some. So really looking forward to hearing all about it. But before we dive into the company, why don't you just talk a little bit about yourself, how you got doing what you're doing today?
Sure. Yeah, my path is kind of wandering. I've always been an artist, kind of like a graphic artist, I guess, because I learned that you can't really make any money selling paintings. So about 15 years old, I was like, oh, I want to be an artist, but I don't think I can make any money. And so I learned graphic design, which was pretty close. I was like, oh, I could design some logos and some business cards for people, make, $25, $50 every once in a while. So that was my, 15 to 21 years old career. And then graphic design kind of led me down the path of marketing because people needed more than a logo. They needed a brochure or, maybe a website or something like that. So taught myself how to build websites. And then that kind of turned into a little marketing agency. The marketing agency eventually evolved into a software company. And then after doing the software company for about 10 years, I kept finding myself more in my garage, working on hardware instead of working on software. And I was like, wait, why am I doing the software as fast as I possibly can so I can go down to the garage? It must mean that I love this more. So started doing a little more like fabrication and manufacturing for my own hobbies. And then realized, some of the stuff that I was doing could probably be helpful to a bunch of other guys like me. So I decided, take a risk and try and make a company out of it. And that's how SendCutSend was born. So here we are 7 years later. And now we can actually call ourselves a manufacturer. At the beginning, I don't think I would have said that. We're just a couple of guys in a garage trying to figure stuff out. But yeah, right now we're doing stuff we didn't really think was possible and doing a lot of manufacturing here in the US and supporting, thousands and thousands of companies.
Yeah, really cool. Obviously, our bread and butter here at Manufacturing Talks. So that's why you're here. But, I'm really curious because you got that background in creative and in software. And you mentioned how kind of your experience was you were drawn more and more to the shop and the mechanical. But why do you think that is? Why that mechanical side and then why manufacturing?
Well, I've always been a car guy.
Okay.
So my dad, growing up, my dad always had car projects. He was into antique cars. Like we had Model Ts. He has a 1925 Stearns Knight, which is a super rare car. All kinds of like brass era stuff. That's what I grew up with. I desperately wanted him to have Camaros and Mustangs and stuff like that, but he liked the antiques. So, but anyway, I grew up around cars. In my early 20s, I could finally afford to have a couple projects of my own. So I always had something going on in the garage. Really, the software company, as we started to have some success, it allowed me to go a little deeper into the car hobby. And it's one thing to like restore a car and do like paint and upholstery. And then maybe the next level is doing an engine swap for a little more horsepower, doing suspension, whatever. I did that. And then I realized like, okay, what's the step after that? So a couple of my projects that led me into manufacturing was I took a wrecked Tesla Model S and took the drivetrain out of it and put it into a very lightweight car, a 1981 Honda Accord.
Oh, wow.
We called it Teslonda, half Tesla, half Honda. Made it into like a gasser style drag car. And I was like, whoa, okay, this is super fun. Like making something that there's not a kit for, making something that there's no parts for. And then I've always been fascinated with steam powered vehicles and could never afford one, like a White or a Doble or something is Jay Leno money. So I was like, I wonder if I can make a steam car. So I took a crack at it. I was mildly successful. But building something like that from scratch, it forces you to level up the tools that you're using.
Yep.
And, I had a hacksaw and a drill press or whatever. But then I got a handheld plasma. Then I bought a CNC plasma table. And then I was exposed to laser cutting. And I was like, oh my God, I need to get a laser. But to get a proper laser, you're looking at $500,000 to $1 million. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I went to my wife and I was like, hey, this hobby thing is kind of getting out of control. I want some really amazing tools. What if I could build this little business to help offset the cost of the tool, so that I get to use the tool for free, basically? Like that was the intent. At the time, I loved the software company. And I was like, I want to keep doing software, but I just want awesome tools at my disposal. And she was like, yeah, go for it. As long as you can like get enough customers to pay for the machine payment, you're good to go. So that was the birth of SendCutSend. And now we're so damn busy. Like I don't even get to send my parts through, I have to order like everybody else.
Yeah. I think there are several threads to that story that are probably pretty common. The whole letting a customer pay for your tools, I think, is probably a common thread. And then, getting way too busy to use it for yourself is also common, unfortunately.
Yeah, the shoemaker's kids go barefoot. I mean,
right, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and I have I think I'm down to one car project right now, and it's pretty mild. So yeah, the garage is it got filled up full of lasers, which is it's fun. It's just it's a different hobby. I was actually able to convince myself that my hobby now is the business. So instead of like looking at car websites or whatever, I'm actually looking at machine websites. I'm looking at tooling websites. I'm looking at raw materials and stuff. That takes up most of my free time.
Yeah, and kind of blessing and curse, right?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah, it is. But it's probably the way to keep me involved the most, because with a car project, as soon as it's done, I'm not interested anymore. I like the build. And what I found with manufacturing and growing a manufacturing company, I don't think the build is ever over. I don't think we'll ever achieve perfection. I don't think we'll ever run out of like new services that we could offer or anything like that. So it's kind of like this endless build. And that's why I've been doing it for 7 years and I'm not bored yet. So I think I got another, 10 to 15 in me, hopefully.
For sure. Yep. Now I have to believe that coming at it from a very different angle as far as like your work, right? What your career was, has to bring something special to the mix. You've got kind of a different take on manufacturing, and I'm guessing that arises from that. Why don't you talk a little bit about how your background makes you think a little bit different and maybe gives you some advantages?
Yeah, it's funny now because after doing it for a while, when every once in a while I'll hear about somebody who's going into manufacturing and they only have a software background. I'm like, oh, you're not going to make it. You software guys, you don't know what you're getting into. But I was that guy. And oh my gosh, it was probably the number one weapon that we had, was not knowing what we were getting into. And so we approached it completely differently. I think if you gave a bunch of kids a basketball and put them on a basketball court and they had never seen basketball before, they would invent amazing rules. They would do stuff that never been done.
Yep.
That's kind of what we were doing. I remember we had a rep from our laser manufacturer come by and he was looking at how we were running everything. And he's like, what the hell are you guys doing? I've never seen it done like this. You're doing it all wrong. And I was like, well, it kind of works. But just that lack of knowledge and coming from a completely different background was great for manufacturing. But then also we got to leverage the best parts of software into manufacturing. And that's where a lot of legacy manufacturers don't have the skill. They don't have the software ability. They don't have the ability to make their own systems to streamline their workflow. And we did. So that was a huge leg up. I think, looking back, if I knew everything that I know now, would I try and go into manufacturing? Like, I probably wouldn't. So being naive was amazing.
Yep. Now, kind of thinking here, your the way you do things. Maybe you should kind of talk about that as the basis of your business. But it's clear to me it's pretty software heavy. I have to believe that helped you get past what a traditional manufacturer might kind of see as a big hurdle, right?
Yeah, very much. Software first. That was just our approach. We definitely approached manufacturing the way that you would approach e-commerce or direct to consumer or something like that. We, coming from a tech background, coming from social and marketing background, we're like, oh, we'll treat this like an e-com. We'll treat it as if we were selling, direct to consumer type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, I learned later that that's really not how manufacturers operate.
Right.
They are sales focused. They're targeting a small handful of companies that are going to be very high value or high revenue. We went the opposite. We're like, well, let's go after, millions of potential customers that are extremely low value, average order value of like $40 instead of 4,000 or 400,000. And I just didn't realize that wasn't how it was done. So our whole approach was very approachable, I guess. Instead of having a sales team and go outreach and try and find clients, we just had the clients come to us, leveraging, all of our software expertise, marketing expertise. We're like, hey, let's have no minimum order. Let's figure out how we can just make one of something instead of 1,000. Because that's what I ran into when I was building all my car projects. You only need one weird dashboard for a steam car. You don't need 1,000.
Right.
But that's what's common in manufacturing. There's setup time. There's conversion. If you have like a drawing, someone has to take that drawing and convert it into their own in-house software. And so that's really where we leaned into the software side and said, okay, how do we do this quoting automatically? How do we eliminate, looking at someone's prints? Obviously they were in CAD, then they exported a print, and then we have to take this print and turn it back into CAD. Like, let's just get the model.
Yep.
And oh God, that was rough. Everyone is like, oh no, you have to read my print, And I was like, well, if you have the model and the model created the print, then just give me the model.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were like, well, we actually modify the print. We don't modify the model. We'll put extra call outs or something on the print. And I was like, well, what are you guys doing? And that's when I realized, oh my God, manufacturing is, it's not quite with the times. And it's changed significantly since day one. 7 years ago, we got pushback about prints all the time. Today, especially with new mechanical engineers, just graduating and everything, they don't want to use the print because their models are dialed in. The CAD is better than it ever has been. So we're able, I think the stat that we were putting out the other day, we just crossed 50 million parts that we've manufactured, and we've used prints 0 times.
Wow.
So leveraging software in order to do that was huge. And I definitely see it as the future. I don't encourage, designers or CAD CAM guys now to focus on prints at all. It's like, focus on your assemblies, focus on how good your models are, and we'll just make exactly what you send us.
That's so fascinating in a couple of ways. One is I did a story years ago about the National Institute for Aviation Research down in Wichita, and they've got several old airframes down there where they're 3D scanning every single part, because the original designs, even though they have the paper designs, they literally can't make the parts from those old designs anymore.
Yeah.
Because of the kinds of things you're talking about.
Yeah. There's as designed and then as built.
Right. And as used. Right.
Yeah. My dad was an architect, And I remember I would help him when I was little. He allowed me to hold the dumb end of the tape measure. That was my job. So
Uh-huh.
if he had a client who needed a remodel, like they were going to extend their kitchen or whatever, we'd go out and I'd hold the tape measure and he'd figure everything out. Oftentimes he had access to the original blueprints to the house. And I remember I was like, "Hey Dad, can't you just use these?" And then and just make your new drawings and then build it. He's like,
Yep.
no. Here's the intention, and then the execution is totally
Right.
different. And oftentimes it would be off wildly. Walls would be off a foot or more.
Right.
Locations were off by a yard, and I think it's very common in a lot of manufacturing as well.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, I've covered 3D printing quite a bit, and so I think most people understand that that's a whole new way of both making things and also designing and using designs. And what I'm finding, I just discovered a whole other thing separate from yours, but yours is a good example of it, is more traditional modes of manufacturing that are now kind of moving into that design realm where it's so software driven. Yours is a great example. Another one is a company that does apparel I just discovered. I'll be covering them here shortly. And they use 3D knitting machines that take a whole garment design and create the entire garment, no cutting, sewing, or anything. And
Yeah,
it's
that's
just
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, and that was the exact word I was gonna use. It's just amazing stuff where if you're not aware of these advances in those more traditional realms like yours, um, you really can get left behind sticking with the old ways, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's kind of a shift happening where, I think maybe 10 or 15 years ago, SendCutSend may not have been able to survive because people would say, no, you're going to have my print. You're going to do all this stuff. We wouldn't be able to offer instant quoting or anything like that. Today we are. And then I think looking 10 to 15 years in the future, no one's going to be talking about prints.
Yeah.
People talk a lot now about how, a lot of machine shops, a lot of guys are retiring right now.
Yep.
All these shops that were started in the 80s and 90s, the owners are ready to call it quits. So there's a lot of businesses for sale, whatever.
Yep.
Those are being either purchased or reimagined by a new generation, and that new generation is more familiar with this technology.
Yeah.
I remember, when I was 20, I would open up the yellow pages and try and find a machine shop and, drive around to the industrial park. And that's just how you got things done. There were no websites, for these guys.
Right.
Now, if you're going to go, take over a machine shop or something, the first thing these guys are doing is building a website, doing some SEO, putting what their capabilities on there. They're using different tools that can do instant quoting and stuff like that. So I'm really excited for what it's going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yep. Now you talked about some of those things that your sales guys told you weren't doing right. What are 2 or 3 of the kind of sacred cows in your world of machining that you've taken on, that you've slain along the way?
Definitely the minimum order quantity.
Yep.
That was the goal from day one, is how do we make it efficient to do a quantity of one, but still make a little bit of money, but not charge so much that no one wants it. So that was a huge issue. But software and technology allowed us to really kill that. The other one that I touched on a little bit earlier was just accessibility to our brand, accessibility to our business.
Yep.
I think in a lot of traditional manufacturing, there's a lot of like B2B formality, where it's like, hey, send us an RFQ and then we'll have a call and then you'll have to discuss something with an applications engineer and then we'll put you in the schedule. We'll see if you qualify for net terms. It can be a 6-week sales cycle. What we did is just kind of what we were doing in the garage, which is like, if someone could walk into the garage and trade us a 6-pack of beer for some parts, then we would do it, and we have done that. I I've had a couple bottles of tequila, a couple good bottles of bourbon, that we've traded parts. So we're like, okay, how do we take that concept and that feel and then do it at internet scale?
Yeah.
So, not having sales, just locking in a price and doing a minimum quantity of one, doing it very quickly, doing it seamlessly. We don't even have a phone number. I mean, so
Yeah.
we're getting one. We have a new phone system. It's about time. We have amazing around the clock 24-hour support via chat and email.
Yeah. But I mean, to break in there, that sounds so revolutionary and counterintuitive, and yet it's worked for you, right?
Yeah, it has. And I will tell you, we are not a good fit for everybody. There are some people who are, we've had 1-star reviews because they're like, they don't have a phone number. The reason that we don't have a phone number is because I need to see your drawing.
Yeah.
We've had people, when we have had phone calls, they paint us a word picture of their crazy sheet metal assembly.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, I have to see it, so email is really best, or chat, or all this other stuff. So it has been a little funny. It puts customers into 2 buckets, those that love it and those that hate it. And the ones that love it deeply love it. And it's definitely, a newer generation.
Yeah, understandably. You've kind of touched on it, but let's dive a little deeper into it. What are the big challenges right now in the business?
I would say scale, probably. I think our timing was just right, where there's a lot of people coming into manufacturing who don't know what yellow pages are. They've never driven through an industrial park and had to knock on doors in order to get something made. So they have the internet, and we're available on the internet. So every month, every year, there's more and more of those guys. They experiment with our service. They like it. They come back, and it kind of has a snowball effect. So we've tried to provide a really good product, really good service, inexpensive, fast, whatever. And what happens is, if you have something good, then a line starts to form. So the biggest issue that we have is, with software, we could scale in a number of minutes. You can spin up a new instance on AWS and you're good to go. With manufacturing, sometimes a machine is 9 months out. We're dealing with an issue right now where we're trying to bring in 4,000 amps of power to one of our buildings, and it's a 13-month process.
Yeah.
So balancing demand and capacity is a continual challenge. We've gotten pretty smart about it. I'm definitely a procrastinator, and I tend to do things very last minute. So now I have a team that is a little bit better at planning. We're already, starting to scout additional locations. As soon as those locations are identified, we start to get power in process. We hold POs on a bunch of different pieces of equipment that we can, if we're not ready for, we bump it to the next month. Next month. So these relationships that we have with our equipment manufacturers are really beneficial to help us get a machine in a month instead of 8 or 9 or whatever. So, and then staffing, I
haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, well, I have a different take on it though, because we don't have any problem hiring. We do have a problem though with getting them enough seat time to where they become experts. We're always trying to compress that time. What do they say? 10,000 hours and you're an expert. We're trying to take 10,000 hours and shove it into 2,000. So we have really great people that we're recruiting, but some of them have minimal experience. And so what we've had to do is develop our own in-house training, our in-house apprenticeships. We're actually building a more formal academy right now, where whether you want to work with us or not, it's somewhere where you can learn, manufacturing and CAD. So we're building that process out so that we can have, more workforce ready to go. but it's like you almost have to build your own little university within your company. Even if there is skilled labor that you can attract, you have to reskill them for your particular process, and that's hard.
Yeah, although, based on what I'm seeing and hearing, I think that's becoming somewhat universal too. And people, again, there of the traditional mindset really struggle with that notion because they've lived in a past where, the technology was such on their side and the training was such on the incoming person's side that there was an immediate match. And that just doesn't exist anymore for a whole variety of reasons. And so
Yeah.
it's another of those examples where you can get left behind if you're stuck in a traditional mindset.
Yeah. It's interesting. We'll have 21-year-old kids, come in, and maybe they have a little bit of experience in a machine shop. We have to train them for our particular ways.
Right.
Or you have a guy who's 60 and he's been in machining longer than I've been alive. We still have to do some training to fit our processes. Once we realized that, it kind of relaxed our demand for having a certain type of skill. Instead, we're just like, are you a cool guy? Are you easy to hang out with? Do I want to sit by you at lunch? Do I want to take you out for a beer? And then also, do you know, if I say, hey, hand me the Phillips, you don't say like, well, who's Philip? We've had that a couple times, but just, yeah, exactly. Good job. You passed.
I can come to work.
And, that's I think Mike Rowe was definitely talking about that too in your last episode, where we're not seeing that as much because kids don't have access to it. Machine shops are not in high schools as much as they were.
Right.
So yeah, sometimes you say, hey, pass the Phillips, or, hey, what type of oil would I put, into a transmission versus a V8? And they're like, I didn't know either one took oil. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening? But if you can find, kids that grew up with cars or go-karts or woodworking or something like that, there is a lot of those people. Even if they have a hobby that's maybe not woodworking or metal or something, but like even 3D printing, that's a really, really good sign. If they do own a 3D printer, that's huge on our job application.
Yeah, makes sense. So then what are the big opportunities you're looking at, say, for the next 3 to 5 years?
There's a lot. There's so much talk right now about reindustrialization and onshoring and American manufacturing and whatnot. So I hope that keeps going. I hope that talk, continues in all the circles that I'm involved in. I was one of the guys who blew a decade making, silly SaaS products and, just weird internet things that made people money, but I don't think it really pushed society forward. I don't know if it pushed America forward.
Well, I'm going to challenge you there, though, because you wouldn't have what you have today if you hadn't gone through that.
It's true. No, you're right.
I can see how it might feel like a waste because you were kind of treading water doing that same, all virtual stuff and not the real world, but it landed you here.
You're 100% right. But I think that there's people today that are building software for the physical world, or they are building it for a deeper purpose than, yet another, taxi for my burrito, or, a silly dating app that we don't need.
Right. That's fair.
The guys who are interested in computational geometry right now are, more than I've seen in a decade.
Yeah.
And they're making new ways to work with CAD, sketch to CAD, text to CAD. They're doing some really amazing things. So yeah, the software world is still very important. I just think that the throwaway world of software, especially when it was all VC driven and, SPAC driven and stuff, I think that's going away, and I'm happy to see it gone.
Yep. Understood. What haven't we touched on that folks ought to know about SendCutSend?
I don't know. This was great. We covered a lot. I think that doing some research, and whether you use us or anybody else, I think it's important to make sure that you are trying to support American manufacturers, or starting your own. There's a lot of opportunity out there. There's a lot of people talk about having things made in America, and we need to make things in America again. My argument is we have always made stuff in America.
Yep.
Just not a lot of people know about it. And, if you started a company in the 80s or 90s, no, you didn't have a website. And so a lot of people complaining right now, they're complaining because they can't find it on the internet. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just go drive to any industrial area of your city and you'll find some amazing stuff that's being made.
Yep.
So, let's help those guys get online. Let's help them find new customers. Let's help that exposure. And then it turns out you can make anything you want in America.
What, in your experience, if you think about the whole, green shoots of reshoring that we do have, what do we need to make that where it has true legs and it's sustainable?
I guess I have maybe two sides of that. The one side is like at the government level, which I don't really talk about because I can't control the government. But if someone was listening,
figure that out, let me know.
Yeah. If someone was listening and they could influence the government, I would love to see loans, low interest rate loans that are available to equipment manufacturers so that equipment manufacturers can support these startups. I think giving the money directly from the government to a startup, it ends up burning a lot of money. But I've found that equipment manufacturers are probably the best people in the world to vet somebody to see if they're worthy of that machine or not. I know I had to jump through all kinds of hoops to get a machine.
Yep.
The sales guy comes out, he meets you, shakes your hand, he looks at your facility, he goes like, okay, if I sell you this machine, am I going to have to come repo it? So they're really good at figuring that out.
Yeah.
I think if those manufacturers had access to money, so that they could sell those machines at 0% or something like that to guys like me, that'd be amazing. And then the other side of the story is like, what can you control directly? And so outside of government, outside of anything else, I truly believe that you can start manufacturing as long as you identify a pain point and you have a solution. If you're sick of trying to get something wire EDM, and you can't find anybody, well, go find out how much a wire EDM machine is.
Yeah.
Figure out if you can make a website to support it. Figure out the raw stock. You can do all this stuff. You can lease a space. You can lease a machine. You can get a line of credit as long as you have a 680 or a 700 credit score. So don't wait for the government to do something. There's a lot that you can do yourself on a credit card, or vendor financing or whatever. Just go out and start doing it. But make sure that you're trying to solve some sort of pain point.
Love it. Yeah. I think that's a great way to wrap things up. Jim, marvelous having you here. I wish you all the best with SendCutSend.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Yep. And a great discussion. I think fits right in with what we're doing here. And as always, thanks to those of you in the audience. You are why we're here. And, I think there was some pretty revolutionary stuff in the discussion today. I can't promise everything that we have every Tuesday when we air our shows is going to be as revolutionary as what Jim brought us, but it's all going to be at least a little revolutionary. So we'll be here Tuesday every week. Come see us. In the meantime, I'm Jim Belosic from Manufacturing Talks, signing off. So long.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Belosic. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.